Hello, we're back again. I've got all my bits and pieces with me. What I've actually done is I've decided where my drawstring is going to go. It's going to go on this side. So I'm going to put a little pin here to remind me that's where my drawstring is, okay? The rest of the bag, you're just going to sew the seams together as normal. But what you want to do is to make sure you've got a nice seam here where you put your drawstring through. So to do that, I turned over 1 centimetre and turned over my edge at the corner there, so you've got a nice neat edge. I'll do a time lapse of this for you as well so you can see. But what I'm going to do is put my pin here to remind me that is where I'm putting my drawstring. Okay, so don't worry about this side. You're going to sew that, that's not folded over, and this will be your bottom end. Okay, so I'm going to turn the fabric over, and because we work sewing on the inside of the fabric, just to remind you, this has been ironed on, and it will be, you can wash this up to 40 degrees. And what I'm doing here is I'm just checking. I'm going to take out that pin there, makes it difficult to fold. So I'm just reminding myself where I want to sew. I'm going to trim this a little bit. The first thing you will always do is sew your drawstring, but I just want you to be clear about the way you're sewing your bag. Like I said, these have got a little bit blunt with so much sewing recently. There we go. So this is our drawstring. This is our first seam. And this will be our second seam. So very like the stitch up bags that you did. What I think would be a good idea is just to put a pin to hold this together. I haven't worked with denim for a while, and it's very robust, but this is a lovely stretch denim. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to start sewing my drawstring. Sewing on the back of the fabric, and I'm just doing quite neat stitches. Again, for those of you who've done stitch up, you can either do a running stitch. If you want to make the stitch to be sewn, that's fine. I'm taking out my pin. If I was on a sewing machine, obviously it's going to be a running stitch, but here I've decided I don't want it to be seen. You could always over stitch it afterwards. I'm going to sew this. There are some nice little tips and techniques you can do. You can add a ribbon to cover up your stitching. You can iron on a ribbon with using, if any of you have got tape left over from your first stitch up workshop. So I'm working my way around my drawstring. The reason we do the drawstring first is it then makes it easier to sew up all the other seams. So I'm sewing this quite quickly, but I just want you to see the way that I work it. Try and keep the bag in the shape that you want it, because it is quite easy to sometimes sew the wrong seam. So this is the seam at the side, like your sunglasses case, to put your mask in. So I've just turned that over, and I'm going to sew along here. We won't put the drawstring in till the end. I'm sewing this quite roughly and quite quickly, but it will just give you a good idea. You could tack this and sew it first if some of you prefer to do that. As you can tell, I'm just doing this quite quickly for you to show you, but I have got a nice one that I finished earlier that I can show you at the end of this little sewing session. And I don't worry if a few stitches show up. When it's ruched, it won't really show. Like I said, I'm not a sewing teacher, I'm a curator. But these bags have developed from a curatorial project. lots of collections in museums use drawstring bags. When you have a costume that's quite delicate, you might have about 20 or 30 different pieces that go with it. And, you know, it could be buttons, belts, buckles, especially with military costume. So often accessories will be added in a little calico bag. So what I'm going to do here is, this is like you've got 4 layers of fabric here. So just do a good stitch here. This is where your drawstring will go through. Okay, so we'll just finish that off there. It's not my best stitching, so I'm going to snip that there. While I'm here, with denim, you do get some stray threads, and just to make it neater for you for working. Okay, and like I said, this is washable. So we've done our seam that is for our drawstring that we're going to put our bag in. Just going to take these pins out. I'm going to give that a little press just to make sure that's all nice and neat. The next bit we're going to sew is the seam down this side. So you're putting your hand in this side to get your mask out of. And here we have your first long seam. You will have a slight twist in the fabric here. Please don't worry about that. When the bag is ruched together, that won't even notice. What I like to do is sometimes just put a little holding stitch here. This is over sewing, where you go over and over the same stitch. I'm going to do it at least 6 or 7 times. I was just thinking, the more confident you get with this sewing, or if you've got any nice threads in your bag. I think somebody I worked with last week had what was called a housewife, which was introduced in the First World War, and it was for men to take their sewing kit away with them to the front. And it was a roll of fabric, and in it you just put your needles and your threads. Now I make a contemporary housewife or a make do and mend kit using denim, which is a really nice robust fabric with some lovely coloured ribbons and everything. So that's nice and firm there. You can do all sorts of things to these once you get going. So we've done our drawstring, nice and secure. We've just tied it there. And what I'm going to do is turn my fabric. I'm going to start sewing this way. So get your 2 edges together. Again, if you prefer to pin this and sew it, a lot of traditional sewers will pin then tack. If you want, I'll show you what a tacking stitch is like, and it does mean you can then take out your pins. To tack, you literally are doing a very, very quick stitch just to hold everything together while you're working on it. So you don't need to put it, you need to keep your needle threaded, which would be really helpful, Ciaran. Let me see, that's why I'm using big needles for threading on while I'm filming. Okay, so I'm going to tack this, and you just can make maybe 4 or 5 stitches. Tacking is very good if you just want to try something temporarily, then you can turn it inside out and having a look. It's very, very quick. Hence tacking when people are sailing, it's like a really quick movement. Okay, so that's my tacking for there. I'm going to now remove the pins, thread up my thread again, and I'm going to sew this up, and then I'll come back to you to sew that seam. So I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes.